Shimata, I'll never forget the afternoon of October 24th, 1944, when I stood face to face with Major Thomas "Tommy" Maguire, the American pilot who'd personally destroyed 35 Japanese aircraft, including 27 of our supposedly invincible Zero fighters, and realized that everything I'd been taught about Japanese air superiority and American pilot incompetence was a lie constructed by propaganda and shattered by combat reality. The Philippine sun was filtering through the barred windows of our POW interrogation room at Tacloban, the smell of aviation fuel mixed with tropical vegetation, and somewhere in the distance I could hear American swing music playing from a radio, Glenn Miller's In the Mood celebrating American victories that I'd believed were impossible. I was Flight Petty Officer First Class Saburo Zero Knight Nakamura, Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service, and after 3 years of aerial combat from Pearl Harbor to the Marianas, I thought I understood everything about fighter pilot excellence, about the spiritual superiority that made Japanese aviators invincible against materialistic American opponents, and about the technical advantages of the Zero fighter that guaranteed Japanese dominance in any aerial engagement. I'd earned my nickname through 15 confirmed victories flying the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, had witnessed American pilots flee from individual combat, and genuinely believed that one Japanese pilot equaled 5 American pilots in combat effectiveness. But what I learned during that interrogation would shatter every assumption I'd held about American aviation capabilities, about the nature of aerial combat in modern warfare, and about whether Japanese training and spiritual dedication could overcome American industrial might and systematic tactical development. Major Maguire would teach me that individual pilot skill mattered less than systematic advantages in aircraft performance, tactical doctrine, and replacement capacity, and that we Japanese pilots had been fighting a losing battle from the moment American industry began producing fighters superior to our Zero. My journey to that humbling realization began on December 7, 1941, when I participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor as part of the second wave launched from the aircraft carrier Shokaku. Flying my Zero fighter over Hawaiian waters at dawn, accompanied by the finest naval aviators in the world, I felt absolute confidence that Japanese air power would sweep American forces from the Pacific within months. The American pilots are poorly trained civilians who lack proper warrior spirit. Commander Minoru Genda had told us during final briefings aboard Shokaku. Their aircraft are inferior to our Zero fighters, their tactics are primitive, and their resolve will crumble when faced with determined Japanese attack. The war will be over before cherry blossoms bloom in Tokyo. This assessment seemed confirmed by our success at Pearl Harbor. American aircraft were destroyed on the ground, American anti-aircraft fire was ineffective, and the few American pilots who managed to take off were quickly shot down by superior Japanese fighters. My personal contribution was modest. I destroyed 2 American aircraft on the ground and damaged a 3rd. But the ease of victory reinforced everything we'd learned about American weakness. These Americans had no fighting spirit, no preparation for real combat, I told my wingman, Flight Petty Officer Kenji Yamamoto, as we flew back to Shokaku. This war will be over in 6 months because American pilots lack the Bushido dedication necessary for aerial warfare. This confidence continued through our early victories in the Philippines, Dutch East Indies, and Southwest Pacific. Everywhere Japanese naval aviation encountered American opposition, the results seemed to confirm our assumptions about Japanese superiority. Overwhelming victories achieved through better training, better aircraft, and superior warrior spirit. The Zero fighter reinforced these beliefs. With its exceptional maneuverability, long range, and adequate firepower, the A6M dominated aerial combat against every Allied fighter it encountered during 1941 and early 1942. American P-40s, P-39s, and F-4F Wildcats couldn't match the Zero's turning performance, climb rate, or range. "Our Zero is invincible," observed Commander Shigeru Itaya after an engagement near Port Moresby, where we'd destroyed 8 Australian P-40s without loss. American and British fighters cannot compete with Japanese engineering and Japanese pilot skill. But the first crack in my confidence appeared during the Battle of Midway in June 1942, when we encountered American carrier aircraft that fought with unexpected determination and tactical sophistication. While we ultimately lost that battle due to circumstances beyond pilot control, the American aviators we faced demonstrated courage and competence that contradicted our propaganda about enemy weakness. "These American pilots are different from what we expected," reported Lieutenant Yamamoto after the battle. "They're using tactics we haven't seen before, coordinated attacks that exploit our weaknesses rather than trying to match our strengths." He was describing tactical developments that American pilots had created through hard experience fighting Japanese aircraft, using diving attacks to exploit American aircraft speed advantages while avoiding turning combat where Zeros held superiority. But at the time, these new tactics seemed like continued evidence of American unwillingness to engage in proper fighter-versus-fighter combat. The true shock came during the Guadalcanal campaign starting in August 1942, when we began encountering American pilots who'd learned from 6 months of Pacific combat and had developed systematic responses to Zero tactics. Instead of the scattered resistance we'd faced earlier, we now encountered organized American fighter formations using coordinated tactics that neutralized our aircraft advantages. "The Americans are learning," admitted Commander Gender during a briefing in October 1942. "Their pilots are gaining experience, their tactics are improving, and they're receiving new aircraft that match or exceed Zero capabilities in some performance categories." His assessment acknowledged uncomfortable reality. American pilots were improving faster than Japanese pilots were being replaced. American industrial capacity was producing better aircraft faster than Japanese factories could match. And the tactical superiority we'd enjoyed during the war's opening months was evaporating. But I maintained my belief in Japanese pilot superiority, even as evidence mounted that Americans were closing the qualitative gap while maintaining overwhelming numerical advantages. "We may lose some battles," I told myself, "but Japanese pilot skill and warrior spirit will ultimately triumph over American materialism and industrial might." This denial of reality continued until October 24, 1944, when I was shot down during the Battle of Leyte Gulf by an American P-38 Lightning flown with such skill and tactical precision that I had no chance to evade or counterattack. My Zero literally came apart around me under concentrated fire from the P-38's nose-mounted guns, forcing me to bail out and parachute into Philippine waters, where I was quickly captured by American PT boats. "You're lucky to be alive, pal," said the American sailor who pulled me from the water. "That P-38 pilot could have killed you 10 times over, but held his fire once you bailed out. Tommy Maguire doesn't kill pilots who've already surrendered." The name meant nothing to me at the time, but I would soon learn that Major Thomas Maguire was the second highest scoring American ace in the Pacific Theater, a pilot who'd destroyed 35 Japanese aircraft through a combination of superior aircraft, superior tactics, and flying skill that matched or exceeded anything Japanese aviators could achieve. My interrogation began on October 25th in a simple wooden building at Tacloban Airfield that American forces had captured during the Philippine invasion. I expected harsh treatment, possibly torture, certainly humiliation, based on what we'd been taught about American barbarism and their treatment of prisoners. Instead, I encountered professional courtesy from Major Robert Patterson, the intelligence officer, conducting my initial questioning, and surprising respect for my status as a pilot despite my defeated condition. "Flight Petty Officer Nakamura," Patterson said through his interpreter, "you'll be treated according to Geneva Convention standards. We need information about Japanese aviation capabilities, but we'll conduct this interrogation humanely." His courtesy was unexpected, but seemed consistent with American weakness. They were too soft to properly interrogate enemy prisoners. But my assumptions about American military incompetence were about to be challenged by an encounter with someone who embodied everything we'd been told was impossible, an American pilot whose combat record exceeded most Japanese aces. The interrogation room door opened, and a tall, confident American officer entered, wearing the silver oak leaves of a major and the wings of a pilot. His flight suit showed signs of recent combat, oil stains, wear marks from equipment harnesses, and his expression combined professional curiosity with the quiet confidence of someone who'd proven himself repeatedly in aerial combat. "Nakamura-san," he said in surprisingly good Japanese, "I'm Major Thomas Maguire, 475th Fighter Group. I understand you're a Zero pilot with 15 confirmed victories. That's an impressive record. You're obviously a skilled aviator." His use of Japanese and his respectful acknowledgement of my combat record caught me completely off guard. This American pilot was treating me as a professional equal rather than as a defeated enemy, speaking my language, recognizing my achievements. "Major Maguire," I replied in my limited English. "You speak Japanese. Where did you learn?" "I studied at university before the war," he explained. "I've always been interested in Japanese culture and aviation. Your Zero fighter was the finest carrier aircraft in the world when the war started. Japanese engineering and pilot training were truly exceptional." His generous assessment of Japanese aviation seemed genuine rather than sarcastic, but I couldn't understand why this American pilot would praise enemy capabilities. Through our interpreter, I asked the question that was burning in my mind. "Major, how many Japanese aircraft have you shot down?" Maguire's response was delivered matter-of-factly, without boasting or false modesty. 35 confirmed victories, including 27 Zero fighters. Your aircraft is maneuverable and well-designed, but American fighters have evolved to counter its advantages while exploiting its weaknesses. 35 victories. 27 Zeros destroyed by a single American pilot. The numbers seemed impossible. This would make Maguire one of the highest-scoring pilots in either Air Force, with a victory total that exceeded all but the most successful Japanese aces. "That is impressive," I admitted, struggling to reconcile American pilot achievements with propaganda about enemy incompetence. "How is this possible? We were taught that American pilots are inferior to Japanese aviators." Major Maguire's response over the next hour would systematically dismantle every assumption I'd held about aerial combat, about national advantages in aviation warfare, and about why Japan was losing the air war despite our supposedly superior pilots and warrior spirit. "Nakamura-san," he began, settling into a chair and speaking through our interpreter, when his Japanese wasn't sufficient for technical discussions. "Japanese pilots at the war's beginning were the best-trained naval aviators in the world. Your pre-flight training was more thorough than American training, your aircraft handling skills were superior, and your combat experience from China gave you tactical advantages we couldn't match." His acknowledgement of Japanese aviation excellence seemed generous, but he continued with observations that explained why those initial advantages hadn't produced lasting victory. But aerial warfare isn't just about individual pilot skill or aircraft maneuverability. It's about systematic advantages in aircraft production, pilot replacement, tactical development, and the ability to learn from combat experience faster than your enemy. He pulled out photographs of various American fighters, P-38 Lightnings, F-6F Hellcats, F-4U Corsairs, explaining how each had been specifically designed to counter Zero advantages while maximizing American industrial and technological strengths. "Your Zero is more maneuverable than any American fighter," Maguire continued, "but our aircraft are faster, more durable, more heavily armed, and better at high-altitude combat. We learned quickly that we couldn't outturn Zeros, so we developed tactics that avoided turning combat while exploiting our speed and firepower advantages. This tactical evolution was something we Japanese pilots had observed but never fully understood. American pilots seemed to avoid honorable fighter versus fighter combat, preferring hit-and-run attacks that prevented us from utilizing our aircraft's superior maneuverability. "That is not proper fighter combat," I objected. "Real pilots engage in turning fights where skill determines victory." Maguire's response challenged my basic assumptions about what constituted proper aerial combat. "Nakamura-san, there's no such thing as proper fighter combat. There's only effective combat and ineffective combat. If I engage you in a turning fight where your Zero has advantages, I'm being stupid, not honorable. If I use my aircraft's strengths to defeat your aircraft's strengths, I'm being professional." His pragmatic approach to aerial warfare contradicted everything Japanese military culture taught about Bushido and warrior honor. We believed that true warriors faced opponents directly, testing skill against skill in fair combat. Americans seem to believe that winning mattered more than how you won. "But doesn't this violate warrior honor?" I asked. "Don't American pilots value courage and face-to-face combat?" Major Maguire's answer revealed fundamental differences between Japanese and American military cultures. American pilots value survival and mission success more than abstract notions of honor. "Our job is to destroy enemy aircraft and protect our forces, not to prove individual courage through suicidal tactics." Dead pilots can't win wars. Living pilots who learn from experience and adapt their tactics do win wars. This philosophy explained American tactical development that had consistently frustrated Japanese aviation. While we maintained traditional approaches to aerial combat, emphasizing individual skill and aircraft maneuverability, Americans had been developing systematic tactics that maximized their industrial and technological advantages while minimizing their initial disadvantages in pilot experience. "Let me show you something," Maguire said, pulling out combat film from his P-38's gun camera. The footage showed a Zero fighter, possibly one I'd flown with, being systematically destroyed by coordinated attacks from two P-38s, using tactics that gave the Japanese pilot no opportunity to exploit his aircraft's maneuverability advantages. "This is how we fight," Maguire explained. "My wingman and I work as a team. One distracts the Zero while the other positions for attack. When the Zero turns to engage one P-38, he exposes himself to the other. Your pilot skill doesn't matter if you're constantly defensive and can't bring your own weapons to bear." The tactical sophistication demonstrated in that gun camera footage revealed systematic American approaches to aerial warfare that Japanese aviation had never fully developed. We emphasized individual pilot excellence, while Americans emphasized team coordination and tactics that multiplied individual capabilities through cooperation. "But surely Japanese pilot skill can overcome American tactical advantages," I argued, unwilling to accept that everything I'd believed about aerial warfare was wrong. Major Maguire's response was both respectful and devastating. "Nakamura-san, you're obviously a skilled pilot. 15 victories proves that, but individual skill has limitations when facing systematic disadvantages. Your Zero fighter has become obsolete compared to modern American aircraft. Your training produces excellent individual pilots, but doesn't teach the team tactics that determine modern aerial combat outcomes. And most importantly, Japan can't replace pilot losses or produce aircraft fast enough to maintain air superiority against American industrial capacity." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "I've shot down 35 Japanese aircraft, not because I'm a better individual pilot than you, but because I fly better aircraft supported by better tactics and backed by an industrial system that can replace my losses faster than Japan can replace yours." His analysis was mathematically accurate and strategically devastating. Japan had started the war with approximately 3,500 trained naval aviators, while America had perhaps 5,000 military pilots of all types. But by October 1944, American training programs had produced over 250,000 pilots, while Japanese pilot strength had declined to fewer than 2,000 experienced aviators. "The mathematics of attrition warfare are inescapable," Maguire continued. "Even if Japanese pilots achieve favorable kill ratios in individual engagements, which you're no longer doing consistently, American numerical superiority means Japan will eventually run out of experienced pilots, while America continues producing replacements faster than they can be shot down." This industrial perspective on aerial warfare was something Japanese military culture had never fully embraced. We believed that warrior spirit and individual excellence could overcome material disadvantages. The Japanese dedication would triumph over American resources. "But what about Bushido?" I asked. "What about the warrior spirit that makes Japanese pilots superior?" Major Maguire's response challenged the fundamental premise of Japanese military ideology. "Bushido is admirable as a cultural tradition, but it doesn't make bullets fly straighter or aircraft fly faster. Warrior spirit matters in close-fought battles between evenly matched opponents. It doesn't matter when one side has overwhelming advantages in aircraft performance, tactical doctrine, and replacement capacity." Our conversation continued for over 2 hours, covering technical details of aircraft performance, tactical innovations that had shaped Pacific air warfare, and strategic assessments of why Japan was losing despite initial advantages in pilot quality and aircraft capability. "Your Zero fighter dominated early war because it prioritized maneuverability over everything else," Maguire explained. "But that came at the cost of armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, and structural strength. American fighters are heavier and less maneuverable, but they're also more survivable. Our pilots can take hits that would destroy Zeros and bring their aircraft home. This design philosophy reflected different national approaches to balancing aircraft performance against pilot survival. Japanese designers had sacrificed pilot protection to maximize aircraft maneuverability, while American designers had accepted reduced maneuverability to enhance pilot survival rates. Dead pilots teach no one, Maguire observed. American pilots survive being shot down, return to combat, and become more dangerous with experience. Japanese pilots often die in their first aircraft loss because Zeros don't protect their pilots adequately. The statistical reality supported his assessment. American pilot survival rates after being shot down were nearly 80%, while Japanese pilot survival rates were below 20%. This difference meant that American aviation was continuously improving through accumulated experience, while Japanese aviation was losing its most experienced pilots permanently. As our interrogation session concluded, Major Maguire made an offer that shocked me completely. "Nakamura-san, I respect your skill as a pilot and your service to your country. When this war ends and you return to Japan, I hope you'll consider sharing what you've learned about American aviation with others. Japan will need pilots who understand modern aerial warfare when your nation rebuilds." His generous attitude toward a defeated enemy reflected American values about reconciliation and reconstruction that Japanese military culture had never emphasized. We'd been taught to hate our enemies permanently, while Americans seemed capable of separating wartime opposition from peacetime cooperation. "Major Maguire," I replied, "you have taught me that everything I believed about American pilots was wrong, that individual excellence cannot overcome systematic advantages, and that Japanese aviation was defeated not by superior enemies, but by superior systems." His response was characteristic of the professional respect he'd shown throughout our encounter. "You fought honorably for your country, using the training and equipment you were given. That deserves respect regardless of which side won. The tragedy is that both sides lost talented pilots who could have contributed to peacetime aviation development instead of dying in combat." I was repatriated to Japan in 1946, carrying with me not just memories of American military superiority, but understanding of systematic approaches to warfare that could benefit Japanese reconstruction. Major Maguire had died in combat over the Philippines in January 1945, killed not by Japanese fire, but in a crash while attempting a risky maneuver at low altitude. But his lessons about American aviation superiority and the limitations of individual excellence continued to influence my post-war career. "We were defeated by better systems, not just better pilots," I explained to other returning aviators. American industrial capacity, tactical flexibility, and training programs produced aviation forces that Japanese approaches couldn't match, regardless of individual pilot skill or warrior spirit. This was my story. Flight Petty Officer Saburo Nakamura, who learned that propaganda about Japanese pilot invincibility was shattered by American systematic superiority, that individual excellence meant nothing against overwhelming industrial and tactical advantages, and that former enemies could teach valuable lessons about why we lost and how we could rebuild. My encounter with Major Maguire taught me that modern warfare was decided by systematic advantages rather than individual valor, that American pilots deserved respect as professional warriors, and that Japan's post-war recovery required learning from those who defeated us, rather than clinging to beliefs that had proven catastrophically wrong. What struck you most about my discovery? That American pilots had destroyed the myth of Japanese invincibility. Have you heard similar accounts from veterans who learned their assumptions about enemy capabilities were wrong? These testimonies help us understand how combat experience challenges propaganda and creates foundations for post-war reconciliation. If you want to hear more first-hand accounts like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Tomorrow we'll be sharing another story about how individual encounters during warfare can transform entire nations' relationships. These voices from the past deserve to be heard. Let's make sure their stories live on.